long before Timothy Leary became a household name, and well before the psychedelic 60s, the use of mind-altering substances had been deeply embedded in various cultures around the world for millennia. Far from being a modern phenomenon, the ceremonial use of these substances represents a continuum of human experience that extends back into the deepest recesses of history, often serving as a bridge between the material and spiritual realms. Let's begin with the New World. In the deserts of the American Southwest, indigenous cultures such as the Huichol have used peyote, a small, spineless cactus, in ritualistic ceremonies for over 5,000 years. Similarly, tinanacatl, or flesh of the gods, is used by Mesoamerican cultures like the Aztecs to describe psilocybin-containing mushrooms. These were not used recreationally, but rather as sacraments in religious and divinatory rituals, often under the supervision of shamans or priests. Dr. Peter T. First, an anthropologist specializing in hallucinogenic rituals among indigenous peoples, has extensively studied the Huichol tribes and their use of peyote. Regarding psilocybin, ethnobotanist Jonathan Ott provides a comprehensive look at its use in Mesoamerican cultures in his book Pharmacotheon. He explores how the Aztecs employed psilocybin in religious ceremonies and cites evidence suggesting these practices date back to pre-Columbian times. Moving to South America, ayahuasca, a brew made from the Banisteriopsis caapi vine and other ingredients, has been a cornerstone of indigenous spirituality in the Amazon basin. The ceremonial aspect is critical, with experienced shamans guiding participants through an often intense hallucinogenic journey said to cleanse the body and soul, revealing cosmic truths and even prophetic visions in the process. Dr. Charles Grob, a researcher at UCLA, led a study investigating the long-term psychological effects of ayahuasca use among indigenous populations. Grob's study suggested that ayahuasca use can lead to reduction of anxiety and depression symptoms, enhance emotional regulation, increase sense of well-being and satisfaction, spiritual and existential growth. In Central Africa, the Bwiti religion uses iboga, a shrub whose roots contain the psychoactive substance ibogaine. Like its American counterparts, iboga is used in deeply spiritual ceremonies aimed at healing, self-discovery, and forging a deeper connection with the ancestors and the divine. James W. Fernandez's book, Bwiti, an ethnography of the religious imagination in Africa, provides ample scholarly grounding for insights into using iboga in African ceremonies. The Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies has funded research into the potential of ibogaine as an addiction treatment, giving scientific credibility to its traditional uses. Suppose we travel back in time to ancient Greece. In that case, we find another instance of ritualistic psychedelic use in the Eleusinian Mysteries. These were initiatory ceremonies held in Eleusis, near Athens, where participants would consume a brew called kaikion, thought to contain psychoactive elements. These ceremonies were so revered that many of the greatest philosophers and thinkers of the age, including Plato and Aristotle, were initiates. Dr. R. Gordon Wasson, Albert Hoffman, and Carl A. P. Rock co-authored The Road to Eleusis, proposing that the kaikion brew used in these ceremonies contained psychoactive substances. Ancient texts like the Vedas of India speak of soma, a mysterious plant, the juice of which was extracted and used in religious rituals. While the actual identity of the soma plant remains a topic of debate, some scholars believe it could have been a psychedelic substance. Additionally, cannabis has been used in various Asian cultures. not just for its psychoactive effects, but also as an aid in meditation and even as an offering in religious ceremonies. Dr. David Elspeth, in his book Soma, The Divine Hallucinogen, argues that the Soma plant likely had psychedelic properties. Even in the Australian outback, indigenous cultures have used native plants like pituri for their psychoactive effects during spiritual ceremonies. The plant is chewed to release its active compounds, which include nicotine and other alkaloids. Additionally, some species of acacia trees found in Australia contain DMT, a powerful psychedelic, and there's evidence that indigenous cultures may have utilized these as well. Dr. Sina Fazell, an Australian anthropologist, has written about the cultural significance and ceremonial use of pituri, confirming its importance in indigenous spiritual practices. This brief tour barely scratches the surface, but serves to emphasize a crucial point. The use of psychedelics for spiritual and healing purposes is a nearly universal phenomenon, cutting across periods, continents, and cultures. Far from being a product of 60s counterculture, psychedelics have served as tools for exploring consciousness and reality for as long as the written, and likely unwritten, record can show. During the 1950s and 1960s, psychedelics entered the medical mainstream with a splash. At that time, research on substances such as LSD, psilocybin, and mescaline was booming. Pioneers like Dr. Albert Hofmann, who first synthesized LSD, and Dr. Humphrey Osmond, who coined the term psychedelic, were foundational in bringing these substances into the fold of scientific inquiry. Research was often funded by reputable organizations, including the National Institute of Mental Health in the United States. Popular figures like Cary Grant openly spoke about their positive experiences with psychotherapy aided by substances like LSD. Dr. Sidney Cohen, an American psychiatrist, was an advocate for its responsible medical use and conducted studies demonstrating its therapeutic efficacy, especially in the treatment of alcoholism. Cohen's work was corroborated by Dr. Betty Eisner, who investigated the use of LSD and other psychedelics in psychotherapy settings. The medical potential of psychedelics was not limited to one or two conditions. They were actively being investigated for a range of psychological disorders: addiction, anxiety and depression, and PTSD. Dr. Charles Savage, in his 1962 study, found psilocybin to be promising for alcoholism treatment. Dr. Stanislav Grof, a pioneer in transpersonal psychology, conducted studies on the efficacy of psychedelics in treating existential anxiety in cancer patients with promising results. Research led by psychiatrists like Dr. Al Hubbard suggested that psychedelics could be used to unlock repressed traumatic memories, offering a new pathway for treating post-traumatic stress disorder. Researchers like Dr. Arnold Ludwig questioned the long-term effects and possible adverse reactions, urging the scientific community to adopt more stringent research methodologies. The media, which had initially been an ally in popularizing the medical benefits of psychedelics, eventually contributed to their downfall. Sensational stories started to overshadow scientifically grounded reports, leading to a moral panic around their use. The late 1960s and 70s ushered in a significant cultural shift that dramatically changed the narrative around psychedelics. As these substances became symbols of anti-establishment sentiment and youthful rebellion, they were increasingly seen as threats to societal order. Media sensationalism, stories of bad trips, psychosis, and moral degradation filled the airwaves and newspapers, often omitting the contexts in which these negative experiences occurred. Political agendas. The government found it convenient to scapegoat psychedelics as they cracked down on the counterculture movements, leading to stringent laws against their use. By the end of the 1970s, psychedelics were classified as Schedule 01 substances under laws like the U.S. Controlled Substances Act. The impact was immediate and profound. Research funding dried up, clinical trials were halted, and a once promising field of study was thrown into a deep freeze. It took years for this perspective to begin to shift and for researchers to start unraveling the psychedelics' potential and pitfalls. By taking this historical tour, we can better appreciate the arc that psychedelics have traced from ancient reverence to modern stigmatization and now to a new era of empirical understanding and therapeutic utility. The dawn of the 21st century marked a turning point. Researchers from elite institutions reignited rigorous studies on psychedelics. Studies have shown that psilocybin has been effective in treating cases of depression that have proven resistant to traditional antidepressants. Research indicated that psychedelics could significantly reduce anxiety, especially in cancer patients facing end-of-life issues. Studies have shown MDMA-assisted psychotherapy to be highly effective in treating PTSD, often with long-lasting effects after just a few sessions. MAPS has been instrumental in pushing for responsible scientific research on psychedelics, gaining attention from the medical community. The Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration are showing keen interest, with some preliminary studies underway for treating combat veterans. For patients grappling with terminal illnesses, psychedelics have been found to alleviate existential distress and improve quality of life. In the context of cancer patients, psychedelics have been explored not just for psychological distress, but also for treating trauma associated with the diagnosis. The legal landscape is changing. Several U.S. states have decriminalized or are in the process of decriminalizing substances like psilocybin. The FDA is granting a breakthrough therapy status to MDMA for PTSD and psilocybin for depression has strengthened the case for their medicinal use. The empirical evidence supporting the efficacy of psychedelics is robust and growing, showing their potential for treating various psychological disorders. We stand on the brink of a paradigm shift in mental health treatment, one that has the potential to revolutionize our understanding of the mind. As we continue to gather data and refine our approaches, the promise of psychedelics in modern psychology becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Research shows the potential of psychedelics for treating various psychological disorders and their relative safety when used in a controlled therapeutic setting. The 21st century psychedelic renaissance is opening new frontiers in the treatment of some of our most challenging mental health conditions. By acknowledging both the checkered past and the promising future of psychedelics, we set the stage for a deeper exploration into their therapeutic potential. As empirical data grows and institutional support increases, psychedelics are finally getting the scientific attention and societal acceptance they deserve.